Welcome to The Kingdom, a podcast dedicated to CCBC Essex Athletics and a land defended by Sir Ross's Knights. Now here's your host, Rocco Geppi.
Hello again, Knights Nation, and welcome back to The Kingdom Podcast, Season 2, Episode number 2. And I am your host, Rocco Geppi. I'm joined by my co-host, Aaron Thomas. Aaron, thanks for coming back.
Oh, thanks for having me again, and glad to be back.
Absolutely. We have a very, very busy show today. Later on in the show, we're going to have part-time athletic specialist Matt Ryan on the show to go over his top 5 moments in Knights history. And then our newest correspondent, Rebecca Plantholt, will have an interview with head baseball coach Sean O'Connor. But before we get to all that, Aaron, big news last week from the NJCAA. They put out a release from the Board of Regents and voting not to count the 2020-2021 season against student athletes for their eligibility years. And here to discuss more of that with us is CCBC Essex Athletic Administrator Greg Witkop. Greg, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Nice to be on a couple times here, so we're off to a good start.
Yeah, well, you know what they said in Major League 2, that's 2 in a row, you win one more, that's a winning streak. So we'll have to see what happens next week. Well, let's dive right into it, Greg. Summarize this ruling for us in a sentence or so, and then tell us why it came about.
So basically, any student athlete that participates on any NJCAA team during the 2020-2021 academic year will not lose a season of athletic eligibility. Really why this came about was that there's so many unknowns right now as it relates to participation and competition. So from one side of the country to the other, or from the south to the north, there's so many differences in governmental philosophy. There's a lot of differences, obviously, in the weather. So as you move into the spring, what will those restrictions be on programs? Talking about baseball or lacrosse, there may be states where you're not allowed to play teams outside of your state. That's a big deal. If you're in New York and you're a baseball program, you're in New England, you're a baseball program, those guys aren't hitting the field till April 15th. So if you can't hit the baseball field till April 15th, this ruling helps those schools to consider all their options. So maybe an 18-game baseball season in a year where you don't use eligibility is worth all the effort and all the logistics and all the fighting that goes into trying to make it work, versus are we going to ask our players to essentially, you don't want to say waste a season, but use a year of eligibility for a season that looks like that, 18 games with a lot of unknowns. So really what this ruling does is it kind of gives those folks an answer as to what they're into or in for. The NCAA has already ruled on the fall and winter, so the spring sports could be coming for the NCAA once, we get past the new year.
Yeah, I think it's, I think not that this was an easy decision, but the fortunate and unfortunate part is we've already gone through a season with COVID. So for the Board of Regents, the forethought to go ahead and make this decision now, there was some data there. There was some evidence as to what could happen in a worst case scenario. So definitely looking forward in this decision.
Yeah, I think the other thing it does is the student athletes, it may take some of them off the fence. So you may have some student athletes who are saying, I'm not going to burn a year. And there's programs out there that can't afford to lose 10, 12, 15 student athletes because they decide I'm not going to use a year for this season that has a lot of questions.
Right.
Greg, can you let us and the fans know some of the ways the NJCAA is being proactive and looking out for the student athletes? You kind of summarized it there, what their plan is, but, in a little bit more detail, some of the ways that the outside of the year of eligibility that the athletes are being helped here.
So they've made some academic eligibility rulings already on spring 2020 so that'll alleviate some of that stress. The reality is not all of our students are I don't want to say capable, but are as strong academically, and not all of them are able to do as well in an online format of classes. So there's a lot of people out there now who say the students that are here this fall, that's what they signed up for. But I think the reality is you have to applaud them for giving it their best effort, knowing that online classes may not best suit them. They're still in college. They're still trying to move forward academically. It's just once they get into it, some of them are going to realize that it's a little tougher than they may have anticipated or may have hoped. And this is not what anyone asked for. I think if you ask the kids, they want to sit in a classroom and learn and be successful. So, the NJCAA has definitely looked out a lot as it relates to the academics of the student athlete. And then this ruling is just the next evolution of that, where students maybe need another year, because if you test into remedial level courses or you're in your entry level classes and you're not doing well, you may need that third year academically to graduate and to move on to the NCAA or NAIA.
I think you bring up a great point with the online versus face-to-face environment. We just sometimes automatically think, oh, this is the tech generation. They've grown up with technology their whole lives. They'll be fine. And the fact of the matter is, they've had face-to-face learning K through 12. And then all of a sudden, we're asking them to go to classes online. I finished the last half of my undergrad degree online, and it takes some getting used to. It took me a good semester or two to get used to the whole environment. And we're asking students to do this, just coming out of high school. Some already have kind of a quasi-semester experience with this. But I think you make a good point there that the NJCAA is recognizing that and really making some changes to help with that. So next question, obviously, once this news broke, it hit social media. We all know what happens when things hit social media. There's probably about an 80-20 contingent out there. And of course, those that are in opposition tend to speak louder and have bigger platforms. Some of the two of the questions that really stuck out for me as I waded through social media was, won't this create a backlog of talent and student athletes at NJCAA levels? And how will this affect student athletes NCAA eligibility? Greg, what are your thoughts on those questions? And, can you help us kind of separate fact from, opinion on those?
Sure. First, the backlog that it establishes for future high school classes. I think there's no doubt that when you have student athletes going through a year academically and a year athletically, and they're not using a season, nobody can argue that it won't create some type of backlog with the student athletes that continue to matriculate from the high schools. The reality is, number one, we need to worry about our student athletes first. They're our responsibility right now. The NJCAA has taken into account future classes of student athletes as they ruled that our currently signed student athletes on our campuses now will be non-counters for letters of intent. So that allows programs to go over their mandated number of letters of intent in the future. So we will be able to sign student athletes from 21, 22 when we get there, because we'll have some allowances that allow us to go over those numbers in all sports. And the reality is, many of our programs, just like the NCAA, our roster is much larger than our number of letters of intent. So I think the issue with roster sizes, you already see, and at one point on social media, there's 4-year programs and even some NJCAA programs carrying 40 baseball players, 45 baseball players. So there's already big numbers. What you may see is students need to look and branch out and look at more options, whether it's at the NCAA level, NAI level, or NJCAA level. And also for us, I don't think that we're going to create backlogs by keeping people here athletically that don't have a need academically for us. Mm-hmm. So, I think we have, and you saw this year, we had student athletes in the spring 2020 who moved on because they had their associate's degree. They had enough transferable credits. So, I think that we're going to continue to move student athletes on. The concern that I voiced when we discussed this as a region was how many opportunities for our students to move on will there be? If the NCAA puts in, a rule that they're not going to charge students with a year of eligibility, will we be able to place our student athletes? So This gives the student athletes the flexibility to make the best academic and best athletic decisions for them. Obviously, you can't argue that there won't be a backlog, but I think people will have options still. People will get creative. It's kind of what we do in sports. When something happens, we have to get a little bit creative.
Sure.
I think you'll continue to see people having opportunities at the next level. Like I said, they might just have to branch out and consider more options.
Understood.
I know the news is I know the news is still fresh here, but have you had any opportunities to talk to any of the coaches on staff and get any of their feelings on this new ruling?
I think we've talked a little bit about some recruitment strategies. We've also, the one thing we've done is really talk to our academic advisors and the coaches combined to talk about, let's start evaluating transcripts and transfer credits and where our student athletes stand right now, so that they can make the best decisions academically today for what their transfer options and credits are going to look like in the future. So, you maybe had somebody who was planning to redshirt this year. You may have a transfer out there who could come here and not use a season of eligibility, which could set them up, if they're a 4-2-4 transfer, set them up to get their AA, only use one season, go back to the NCAA with 3 years. That segues a little bit to the second part of Rocco's question about the NCAA. I think we wisely need to consider to listen and learn more about how those transfers will be impacted by NCAA rulings. So when we're looking at progress to degree requirements at the NCAA level, we need to learn and continue to advise our student athletes accordingly. So we're going to work with all our partners, our leadership at the NJCAA, who has been great through all of this, and then our academic advising team here to work with the student athletes to put them in the best position academically. The athletics part, I think, will take care of itself, but the academic part, to make sure we have them on good footing to be able to move on whenever they elect to.
Excellent. Well, a lot of exciting stuff going on, especially for a season where currently no athletics are being played. It's things going on in the background to make sure that we can continue to put our best foot forward as an association in the NJCAA. Greg, we appreciate you coming in. Is there anything you wanted to add about this or anything related to this ruling from the NJCAA eligibility?
No, I think that the thing I would probably put out there is just that people continue to control the things they're able to control, with academics being a major part of that. And also, everyone's going to have a little bit of patience. Everyone wants, like you said, the social media era, everyone wants the 5-minute quick reaction without, really taking time to evaluate rulings and evaluate decisions that are made in the best interest of everyone. So I think, a little bit of patience and then a little bit of teamwork as we find ways to continue to help student athletes. I think that's what we all want, what's best for the student athletes. I think everybody arguing wants that. So how can we find a way to achieve that using everyone's talents and everyone's ideas?
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. I think
a little patience.
Right. All right. Well, again, we appreciate you for coming on, Greg. Like we said, two weeks in a row. So we'll see how much we can keep this rolling. Always a pleasure. Folks, when we return, we'll have Rebecca Plantholt's interview with head baseball coach Sean O'Connor, Rocco Geppi alongside Aaron Thomas. We'll be back in just a few seconds. You're listening to the Kingdom Podcast, a podcast dedicated to CCBC Essex Athletics.
Times have changed, and I will not stay stuck in a job because college has no time for me. I will not let a limited schedule limit me.
Rethink what's possible with CCBC. Visit us online and see what you can be.
And we're back, folks. Thanks for sticking around. Rocco Geppi alongside Aaron Thomas here on the Kingdom Podcast. And Aaron, like we discussed a week ago now, as this podcast is airing, the release came out probably around like 4:30 in the afternoon on last Thursday, the 21st. And right away, as I mentioned in the interview with Greg, I mean, social media was a buzz from athletic departments, parents, student athletes, different associations that, cover junior college sports. It was a buzz, and there were a lot of things being thrown around. And so I think the more we can get folks on like Greg to kind of give us the facts of the matter, he's involved in a lot of stuff on the regional level, which is involved at the national level. I think it was a great informational session that we had today.
Yeah, absolutely. And the facts of the matter aren't usually as appealing as the loud opinions, but they're the important information that we need to know because, I had no idea about the transfer rules and whatnot. And that's going to be important stuff, not just for us as administrative people, but also for the fans at home. There's going to be a lot of new things moving forward. And I was also really encouraged to hear about some of the interactions he had with the coaching staff and how they're all on board in terms of learning what their new rulings are going to be and making sure that everybody's on the same page moving forward. So good advice from a fearless leader, I guess.
Fearless indeed. So Aaron and I are going to check out for just a few moments here, more than a few moments, as we swing things over to our newest and our, I guess we could say our first correspondent, Aaron. This is our first interview with a correspondent, and it's going to be athletic specialist Rebecca Plantholt, who is going to bring you an interview. She sat down with head baseball coach Sean O'Connor the other day. You're listening to the Kingdom Podcast, a podcast dedicated to CCBC Essex Athletics. And now we swing over to that interview, Rebecca Plantholt with Sean O'Connor.
Hello, this is Rebecca Plantholt for the Kingdom Podcast, and today I'm joined by head baseball coach Sean O'Connor. Thanks for taking the time to talk today, Sean.
Thanks, Becca. How are you?
I'm doing well. Taking a look back before we jump into this season that we're facing, how did the team take their season being ended early due to the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, kind of the ironic part of the season ending is I don't think anybody really grasped that the season was truly going to end. When we had our meeting, it was, hey, come back and make a decision in 2 weeks. So for the most part, our kids handled it really well because they thought they were going for a 2-week vacation. I think from a coaching staff perspective, we probably should have done a little better job collecting certain things and realizing that they might not come back. But I think for all of us, nobody really realized that this could last as long as it did, and definitely not into the fall. But they did a good job as well. We had 8 sophomores. 6 of them found other colleges. The other 2 are returning. 1 graduated in that mix. So I think when you're judging really junior colleges, in this pandemic or whatever you're talking about, if you're still getting kids to move to the next level, especially academically, I think the kids did a fantastic job with that.
Absolutely. And with all this uncertainty, talk to us about how these different changes have implemented how you're managing the team day to day during the pandemic.
Well, the number one thing is obviously when I come home and maybe we didn't have a great practice day, or maybe we didn't have a great study hall day. My wife seems to kind of remind me that it's not the norm. That maybe our expectation, as high as it is, probably should roll it back down into something that's more manageable or more attainable. I kind of compare that to the greyhound that's on a track that if he ever catches the rabbit, he never runs it again. So I want to raise the bar as high as we possibly can. But it's a struggle. I think it's a struggle for anybody that has anybody in any type of academics right now. Our kids are definitely not designed to do online learning. So you have to figure out the kids that can handle that, the kids that need special attention. We're going the extra mile as far as checking grades, not just waiting for teacher reports. We have a check-in that they have to go to class, even though it's virtual. We require them to check in. So it's just different. I guess that's the short answer of it.
Yeah, and we know that a lot of this is not normal. So how do you continue to keep them focused? You mentioned doing the check-ins, and we're still having a lot of the same things, but how do you maintain all of this when your physical contact is very minimal?
I think it's everything. I think it's frustrating for us as coaches because I think we truly check the boxes when we accomplish things. Okay, well, we got this done. Okay, we've implemented this. We've done this. So from a baseball perspective, we haven't got many check marks off. Okay, we've taken care of this. We've taken care of that. But I think from a kid's perspective, when it's simple and you kind of, okay, guys, this is what we're asking you to do. We're asking you to check into classes. That's step one. Step two is obviously pay attention in class. But at least if we can get them to the point where we can get them in where we need to kind of move them in a direction. Our weightlifting program, obviously we don't have a weight room right now. We've asked guys, here's our weightlifting program. It's an app. They can physically do it outside without having to go to a weight room, free weights, body weights, so that we're not falling behind in that, I guess, subject, if you want to call that. So using technology to help them kind of organize their life and different things like that. The trouble or the problems that we've had are the out-of-state kids, the kids that aren't here yet, that took the opportunity to being away for a semester, meaning they're still at our college, they're still taking virtual learning, but they're not living in Baltimore. They're not coming down to Essex for practice. They're just, in Massachusetts or wherever they are. Those kids are a little harder because obviously they have the grind of their everyday family. Maybe some of them had to get jobs. Maybe some of them had to, take care of a little sister for daycare. So their challenges are a little different than ours. So if we can help them with time management, that's what really kind of, I think, is going to separate us beating this. And let's be honest, I don't think anybody's going to win in this scenario. I think it's just, can we minimize the damage so that we can get the winning run at third base in the bottom of the ninth? That's what we're trying to do. We're kind of down a couple runs, and how do we keep battling till we get that opportunity to win?
Yeah, you and your coaches are doing a great job during the practice environment and facilitating safe and socially distanced practices according with all of our COVID policies that we've implemented. Can you share with the viewers how you're going about to execute those plans?
Well, the first thing I did is I read the COVID policy. That's the first thing I did. The second thing is I reread the COVID policy to kind of wrap my head around. And I think me and Coach O'Brien and Coach DePino really bounced ideas out for almost 3 to 4 weeks of how we were going to do this. So, we had a clear idea of what it was going to look like. And to be honest with you, I think we pretty much hit it exactly how we thought it was going to look. So we were able to kind of come up with policies, figure expectations for us as a staff, try to raise expectations for the kids. We did a lot of virtual learning. So if it comes to the idea of, hey, we want to teach you how to play catch, or, hey, we want to teach you how our base running system works. We've done that through Zoom meetings. So, instead of us having to bring groups in, because you can't. I know the frustration part of this whole idea is, well, we have to put our offense in. We have to put our defense in. You do. You absolutely do. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But you can also be smarter about this and say, you know what? Do I really want to teach this 3 times in a row? Or can I do it in a group setting and have this go through this? Because chances are they need tons of reps anyway to get this stuff. So really in the fall, we took the approach of just trying to introduce things to these kids as opposed to trying to drill it down and get tons of reps and different things like that. But also understanding that these are the rules. This is what we're going to do. From a COVID perspective, I think all of us kind of, and I'm sure you're in the same boat that I am. Okay, what happens if we get an apartment or a group of kids that get this, and how we react to that. And I think the whole thing is obviously it's okay. You call this person, you call this person, you call this person. Almost treating it like if there's a major injury from a sport. Okay, who's going to the hospital with a kid? Or all right, this kid gets it. This kid, this kid calls you sick. So I think understanding those type of policies, and they're evolving. I know we got an email a couple weeks ago reminding us of just when people were sick, what our policy at the school is. And I think understanding from our kids that you're being held to a higher standard than the regular student at Essex. And understanding that if we can do this, and I'll say it on the podcast, if we can do this in the fall, there's no reason we can't do this in the spring. We've had 0 transmissions of COVID since we've started practice. Our kids are healthy. They're playing baseball. So from an Essex perspective, if any colleges out there that want to come to Essex and play, we're a safe environment.
And that was part 1 of Rebecca Plantholt's interview with head baseball coach Sean O'Connor. We're going to hit a quick break. When we return, part 2 of that interview here on the Kingdom Podcast, the podcast dedicated to CCBC Essex Athletics.
Let's talk about college. Times have changed, and I say no to an education at the cost of crippling debt, because paying off student loans for the next 30 years is not in my financial plans.
Rethink what's possible with CCBC. Visit us online and see what you can be.
And we are back. Thanks for hanging around. We are going to send things right back over for part 2 of Rebecca Plantholt's interview with head baseball coach Sean O'Connor here on the Kingdom Podcast.
With all that said, let's talk about fall practice just a little bit here. What's going well with the team? Where do we need to be improved, and where are we going?
Well, we start on time, which is good. We end on time, which is really good. In between there, okay, we got to work on that stuff. Look, our evaluations is really what the fall's about. In a typical fall program for us, you're evaluating who your shortstops are, or who your second basemen are, what kind of needs you have to pick up, because in case you get that call in January where somebody says, hey, I'm looking to come to Essex, or do you need a pitcher? Do you need this? We truly have to evaluate where our roster is and what our strengths and our weaknesses are. Unfortunately, you're asking guys to go 3 times a week and take a week off. So it's really hard to get consistency in what we do. I think our pitching perspective has been okay. I think our hitting perspective has been okay. I think our defense has been really good. I think from a defensive perspective, our energy when we do defensive stuff, it's been at a very, very, very high level. So if we can get our pitchers to throw the ball over the plate, and we can get our hitters to swing the bat, I think I'll be really happy during the fall and the spring. If our pitchers can't throw strikes and our batters keep the bat on their shoulders, then we're going to have some really good defense that isn't really going to show well in that. But I think for us, this fall has all been about a transition, and for us trying to get ready for January, because January is going to be unlike any January we've ever had. And we've told the kids that, look, we're gonna have to ramp up as quick as we possibly can. Not ramp up because we're gonna play games, ramp up because this will be hopefully the opportunity for us to have all 32 guys there together, so that we truly can say, okay, you're next to Billy, and Billy's next to Tommy, and Tommy's next to Robbie. Okay, who's better? Because I really think it's hard to. You get an idea and you create those depth charts, but I think from a coaching perspective, we can obviously do a better job. But look, the long answer of this whole thing is we got an 0-2 count. and we're just trying to figure out how to battle an 0-2 count, because this is not ideal. It's not what anybody wanted to do. But as we tell our kids and what we preach our kids, if you got to deal with, you can control the controllables, and reality is this is what we've been dealt with. And, we've gotten through 3 weeks, 6 total weeks. I guess this is week 7. And then next week will be our final week. So I think it's been a pretty good fall, knock on wood. No injuries, no rainouts. The field looks amazing. Thank you, Becca. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, everybody. Joe, Matt, Coach O'Brien puts a lot of work into that field. But if you want to look at the Coach O'Connor era in a year in a nutshell, our field looks better. We have more ball players than we've ever had. I think academically we're doing a heck of a lot better than we were a year ago. So I think you got it, and we're 2-0 in Maryland Junior College right now. So that's a pretty good year. If you told me when you hired me that our field would improve in a year, our kids would be better academically, and we'd have a perfect record in Maryland Junior College, I think I'd take that. So I'm gonna look at it from that side as opposed to the class is empty.
All right. Well, we're going to hold you to that record then there, Coach.
Well, I don't think we're going to lose another game in 2020. So I will promise you that we will not lose a Maryland Junior College game for the rest of the year. So you can hold me to that. Absolutely.
I might bet on Essex on that one. Well, thanks again for joining me today. For Sean O'Connor, I'm Rebecca Plantholt reporting for the Kingdom Podcast. And back to you, Rocco.
All right. Well, thank you, Rebecca, and welcome to the Kingdom Podcast. Rebecca Aaron, as we said, the first correspondent here on the show, and I think she did a fantastic job.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely did. Great interview there. Always nice to hear from Coach O'Connor. And, we had so much excitement headed into the baseball season last year. So even more excitement headed in this year, given the way the season was shut down last year.
Most definitely. We're going to step away, just a quick break, 30 seconds, and we're going to bring on our next guest, Matt Ryan, our part-time athletics specialist here on the Kingdom Podcast, a podcast dedicated to CCBC Essex Athletics.
Let's talk about college. Times have changed, and I say no to an education at the cost of crippling debt, because paying off student loans for the next 30 years is not in my financial plans.
Rethink what's possible with CCBC. Visit us online and see what you can be.
Times have changed, and I will not stay stuck in a job because college has no time for me. I will not let a limited schedule limit me.
Rethink what's possible with CCBC. Visit us online and see what you can be.
Knights Nation, we are back from break, and joining us now, Matt Ryan, who many of you don't know is in his final week with us, our part-time athletic specialist. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Those of you that don't know, Matt joined us as an intern in January 2017. He is the voice behind the introduction to the show and has recently accepted a full-time position with Harford County Parks and Rec. So we thought, what a better way to say goodbye than to put him to work one last time. And with that, we're going to give you in this segment, Matt Ryan's top 5 Knights moments. Matt, we appreciate you coming up with this list. And we're going to hit right into it. Number 5 for you, the 2018 Knights Baseball World Series team. I mean, I think there's some obviousness to that number there and why you put it in. But why don't you explain to us how that made your top 5?
Yeah, so just watching that team, it was just so much fun. Like, just something happening different, something happening different every game. Like, there was no one good player. It was just the whole team working together, just working together well, playing well, and reaching the ultimate goal of making it to the World Series, and actually watching them play in the World Series and going all the way to Oklahoma and playing out there. It was just so much fun to watch, and just so much fun watching them play hard and winning a couple games out there. Might not have ended how they wanted it, but it was really fun for us, as the college, to watch them actually get out there and play like that.
Yeah, it was truly a special moment. Maybe one of the not so special moments was having to get up at 4:30 in the morning to get them to the airport by 6. But you make sacrifices when your team qualifies for the World Series. You know, one of the things that stuck out for me, and you're kind of caught right in the middle of this, is 2 years before that, in 2016, they won the regional title for the first time since 1992. And then 2017, your first season here, they had a bad drop-off. I mean, if it was bad luck, it was being caught out at the baseball field in the Kingdom. So they went from a regional champion to, you know, with all due respect to that team, and many of which I still talk to this day, but they went from regional champion to Bad News Bears. And so when the 2018 season rolled around, you know, there wasn't this expectation. The expectation that was kind of set for that ball club definitely was a regional Final Four. And even in the year that the 2017 year, they still made the Final Four for the Region 20 tournament. And so I think we kind of expected them to get there, but then they knock off Frederick, and they knock them off in a big way because Frederick got into some pitching trouble earlier in the tournament, and the Knights took advantage of that. Then they roll through Mercer, who 2 years earlier, you know, just pounded them into oblivion. And that was, in and of itself, was crazy because the weather, game one was, both games were supposed to be played at Mercer. Game one was played at Hartford Community College because Mercer's field was just unplayable. Game two, the next day, drive up to New Jersey and play in Mercer. The Knights win it in walk-off fashion. And then that was on a Saturday. So Monday morning, we're scrambling, and not scrambling, but we're working together, and we're setting up, you know, hotels and buses and plane tickets and, you know, all this stuff. And then they get out to Oklahoma, Matt, and they win that first game, which was just a special moment. We're all sitting back here watching on our laptops or our smart TVs, and to see them win that first game and come within a crazy play of winning that second game, I you know, definitely would have had this in my top five.
Yeah, it was awesome to watch that.
Moving on to number 4 for Matt Ryan. Men's soccer on September 3rd, 2019, Isaiah Price, who would go on to be a 2-time All-American here at Essex, hits a game-winning free kick against Montgomery College in the 87th minute. That would give them a 2-1 victory and would go on to win the NJCAA Men's Soccer Moment of the Week. Matt, why don't you take us through that kick, because I know you were there. I can't remember if you were up in the booth working on the stream, but I know you were definitely there.
Nah, so I was down on the scorer's table, and I remember you just running over with your camera or on your phone, and you're just like, just watch something crazy happen here. And out of nowhere, Ike just hits this perfect free kick, upper 90, to take them in the lead and ultimately win the game. And that celebration that they had, that moment of like triumph and victory, it was just unbelievable. It was just so much fun to watch that.
Yeah, Aaron, I see you up there cracking a smile. You have to remember that game.
I do remember the game. I don't remember. I wish I could remember the call that I had, but I do. I just, when listening to Matt describe it, brought back the flashback of just watching Isaiah play. He was such an electric player. He was always kind of like 1 or 2 moves away from breaking the game open or making a big play. So when he did have moments like that, it was that much more special because, you know, you'd sit on the edge of your seat for, you know, the first 40 minutes of the game waiting for him to do something, and then he'd finally break through. So it's a pretty moment for sure.
I think I could take a guess on how that call went because I have a little basket here of Aaron Thomas calls in it that I could pull out. So I'm willing to bet it went something like, oh! So it could have been that one, or Mama, there goes the man again. So that's what my guess is. One of those two.
Yeah, it was loud, I'm sure.
Moving on to number 3, another very special moment in Matt's top 5. The Knights women's basketball team comes back after a 15-year hiatus. And, oh, by the way, they didn't do anything but go 30-2, win the region, win the conference, make a national tournament appearance, which obviously did not happen because of COVID. A lot of things happened in regional and conference titles for the first time in like 40 and 37 years. Matt, talk to us about how the women's basketball team return made number 3 on your list?
So obviously this was my first time really ever working with women's basketball. Didn't know too much to expect, like what to expect going into the season.
Mhm.
And just after watching a couple of their practices, it's like, wow, these girls they're talented, they're amazing, they're really good. Going into the first couple games, wow, this is something special to watch. And then it just got into who's going to go off every game, who's going to be the player to do something crazy, who's going to score. I don't know, like Maya scored 81 points one game. How many points are they actually going to score in the game? Like, who's going to take it? Was just so crazy to watch. They had so many talented players on that team, and it was just so much fun seeing how, like, what they could do every game. It was just something different every game with them, and how much they could just take control of the game and just pretty much just run away with it a couple times, and they were just fun to watch.
Yeah, Chick-fil-A is one of our sponsors, and of course they were on hand most of those home games. Could you imagine what it would have cost them if they gave away a free chicken sandwich every time the Knights hit 100 points?
They would be losing a lot of money.
Aaron, your thoughts on the women's basketball team? I know you called most, if not all, of their home games last year.
Yeah, it was really fun. I mean, Matt, you really described it perfectly there with, it was a who's who of, scoring, where it was, Maya had the 81-point game, and she did kind of lead the team in scoring most nights, but there was a lot of nights that, somebody else would come up and make a big play, or whether it was offense or defense. I mean, there's so many players stepped up, and the coaching staff was always fun to watch from the sideline too. They were always very animated.
For him to bring his recruiting, his play calling, his staff to Essex and build such a quick, notable powerhouse really stands to the testament of a lot of people. And he'll tell you too, we talked to Sini a lot. His staff means so much to him. Coach Tariq Cephas, first-year coach last year, coming back for this season, he's been promoted to associate head coach. A lot of talent and a lot of great minds on that staff. And then, of course, the big three in Maya Moy, Casey Gagan, and Aislinn Flynn all transfer to D1 schools. Casey and Maya just down the road at UMBC, and going back home to her native New York. Aislinn is at Long Island University. So, that speaks to the testament of the program as well. I think justified in this top 5. All right, gentlemen, moving on, we go back to the pitch. Men's soccer, September 8th, 2017. I believe this is, at this point, Matt was now part-time with the Knights, and this was his first soccer experience, I think. And this season he got to see some pretty good talent. Jake Dengler, who would go on to play Division I soccer, and he was an All-American in his lone season here with the Knights. He hits 2 free kick goals within 2 minutes against Prince George's in a 5-2 win. And I did have to go back and look at the tape. I vividly, I remembered a little bit of these kicks. But when you go back and look at them, it was almost no effort from him.
Yeah, this was always something that just stayed with me from working with you guys from about 3 years ago now. I mean, this is a moment that has always just stuck with me, because he hit the first free kick, and you're just like, from what I remember, it was like a good, maybe 30-yard free kick. It had some decent size to it, and he just hit it with no effort, and it was just a perfect goal. And then within 2 minutes, he gets another free kick, and just like nothing, just like clockwork, just hits it again. And it was just like, that shouldn't be that easy. Like, something like that shouldn't be that easy, shouldn't be able to be repeated like that, but he just made it look so easy, and it was just amazing seeing that happen so quickly. It was just, that's something I really won't forget.
Yeah, Aaron, what do you remember from that game? I know it's been a little bit of time now, and you've since called, probably about 50, 60, 70 games by now.
Yeah, I don't mean this with any disrespect, but I honestly did not really remember this until we started talking about it. And then you when Matt started describing it, I was like, oh yeah, no, I do remember the 2 special free kicks, particularly the one. He was a ways out of the box out on that first one, and he hit it perfectly. It reminded me, listening to you describe it, Matt, it reminded me of, we're in the middle of the World Series right now in baseball, and Randy Rosarena is, the best baseball player in the world right now. It's like he sees two pitches and he hits them for home runs every time. And it's just sometimes you're seeing the ball and you're striking it well, and it's, it was just one of those days for him on the pitch. And I wonder what he thinks about that. I wonder what his story is on those days. Was it just his day? Was it a little luck? I'm sure he has a little bit more of an elaborate story on how it worked out for him.
Yeah, it was definitely a special moment. And of course, there are a couple of big games on the Knights men's soccer calendar that you're always going to circle. One of those games is going to be Frederick, and the other game is going to be Montgomery, and then you're going to circle Prince George's. Those are always three very tough matchups that, not that head coach Joe Fiedler doesn't want to win them all, but he especially wants to win those games. We will transition to the number one moment for Matt. And I think we have the video on this. Do we have the video? Let's take a look at the video.
Knights really blowing the doors off. But he smokes another one to center. Fyffe going back, looks at the wall. He sees if he has room. Heading back. Did he just catch that ball? Oh, my goodness. What a catch by Mitch Fyffe into the trees. He brought that one back. Oh, my goodness. He was in the trees. He hit a branch. He almost fell over the wall, and the ball stayed in his glove.
The Knights were owning this game. We talked about it a little bit earlier. Frederick's pitching had been decimated. Actually, their number one ended up getting drafted that year. And so the Knights at this point, I believe, are up like 16-4 or something like that. And there's a shot to center field, and Mitch Fyffe gives chase. This was a proud moment for me on multiple levels. But Matt, I'll let you describe the rest of this.
So for me, it was just everything fell into place. First, the call for the play was just absolutely amazing. Seeing the play actually happen and fold out, and then Mitch's reaction coming up with the ball, it was just perfect. Like everything fell into place together, and everything just came in together, and it was the perfect call. You couldn't have asked for anything better from that.
Yeah, it was Franco Velasquez on the mound still. He got the start for that game. His reaction was great. I wish we had – the only thing missing from that game is that had we the ability to hardwire the camera internet, the picture would have been a lot better. One of my proud moments in that call was the call was by Andrew Feminella, who is an intern, and he started the internship that not the spring semester, but in the fall, and came back with us. So we kind of eased him into broadcasting. He started on the broadcast on camera, listening to me do play-by-play. Then we put a headset on him as he's still doing camera, and he did some quasi, color commentary. Then we brought him in to do color commentary. Then he started doing play-by-play. Like the whole season, we're systematically taking him to the next step. And then the call that he gives on that shot was probably, in no offense to any intern that has ever been in that position, that's probably the best call by an intern ever.
Yep.
Well, Matt, the top five, we'll run it down one last time. Number 5, 2018 Knights Baseball World Series season. Number 4, Isaiah Price hits a game-winning free kick against Montgomery in the 87th minute, 2019. Number 3, Knights women's basketball returns after 15 years and goes 30-2. Number 2, men's soccer, Jake Dengler hits 2 free kick goals within 2 minutes of each other in a 5-2 win over Prince George's. And your number one moment in 2018, the Knights region championship game, Mitch Fyffe goes waist high over the center field fence to rob a Cougars would-be home run. Matt, that about sums it up for your top 5.
Yeah, so many incredible moments here at Essex, and too bad I couldn't expand it anymore, but those are 5 moments that I'll pretty much remember for the rest of my life.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And, we'll still be seeing you from time to time. On a personal note, I do want to say, Matt, you are going to be missed. It's been amazing having you go from an intern to a part of our employment staff here. Very proud of what you've become and things that you've accomplished and what you've learned here. Wish we could keep you, but you can only keep the baby bird around so long before you got to let them fly off. And we know you'll be back at some point. But definitely, one of my top 3 interns of all time. I'll tell you off air what number you fall into. I can't do it on air. So I'm going to miss you, but I want you to know that I'm very proud of what you've done.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. There he is, Matt Ryan, for the first time and only time. Now, you'll continue to hear him because he is the voice of the introduction. We're going to hit a quick break, and we'll come back. I'll be back with Aaron. We'll sum up the rest of the podcast and get you out of here. We appreciate you sticking around for the Kingdom Podcast, the podcast dedicated to CCBC Essex Athletics. All right, back on the Kingdom Podcast, Rocco Geppi alongside Aaron Thomas. And Aaron, we to recap the show, we talked a little bit already about our interview with Greg. But what was the one thing that stood out in that interview, in the explanation of the new NJCAA rule for this season?
For me, it was the eligibility rule. I can't, let's say I'm surprised. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do, especially he used the baseball example, the baseball season example, of some of these teams only going to be playing 18 games. I think that's the right thing to do, to not charge the student athletes with a year of eligibility for that. But I can't say that it's not a little bit surprising, But no, I think it's the right thing to do, and that was what stood out to me the most. And I'm glad that an organization that is in charge is putting the student athletes first, because that's what matters most.
Yeah, absolutely, and not to be disrespectful to the NCAA, but I think at the NCAA, I think they do care about the student athletes. The NCAA is more of a business than anything else. And I think, even though the NJCAA is a business, I think they do, when they say, it's kind of like when a big business says, we put our customers first. No, you don't. You put your bottom line first and your investors first, and somewhere in the top 5, your customers will fall. When the NJCAA says they put student athletes first, I've been around here long enough to know that is true.
And that's comforting, and that's absolutely comforting. If the broadcaster's comfortable with that, then I'm sure the coaches and the student athletes are, and that's what matters most.
We also heard from Rebecca Plantholt making her debut here on the show, interview with Sean O'Connor, head baseball coach, and Sean talked a lot about focusing on the transition, not only through the pandemic, but into the spring, using the fall season, how even though it's a little bit different, he would generally use the fall season as an evaluative season, because even if they were playing scrimmages right now, which they're not because of COVID, they would be evaluating their student athletes. This is the time for evaluations, is the fall. And then finally, something we've heard over and over again on this show last week and again this week from Greg Witkop, he talked about controlling the controllables. And that seems to be, I think if we came up with a motto for Knights Athletics 2020-2021, it would be Knights Athletics control the controllables, because that's what everybody's looking at right now to get us to that next step of being able to play sports in January.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the baseball has an immense luxury with that because, they don't have the contact that the other sports do in terms of the physical contact. So, if you're a pitcher and over the off season, you really wanted to work on your changeup or your breaking ball or adding some more velo to your fastball, you have an excellent opportunity to work on that right now directly with the coaching staff. And, the hitters have it, whether it's launch angle or whatever it is, the baseball team, I think, has an immense luxury in front of them in terms of all this practice time and all this hands-on time with the coaching staff. Not that the other teams don't have that as well. It's just different. With lacrosse, you need to get in there and bump around a little bit. You just, the opportunities to do that are not the same as they usually are.
Most definitely. And then, of course, we had Matt's top five, saying goodbye to Matt. He is heading over to Harford County Parks and Recs. We'll miss him. He's still going to be around for some weekend stuff and some games here and there. We're definitely going to miss having his knowledge of things around. One thing I didn't say is Matt came around. Matt was actually a part of the first scoreboard overlay of our live streaming. And the funny part is we did that, I want to say sometime in mid-April. And that was the time. He was now 3.5 months into his internship. And that was the time he chose to tell me, oh yeah, I'm like a computer nerd and I rebuild my own computers on my own time. And I'm like, I'm trying to launch live streaming here, and here you are, the computer genius. And it took you 3 months to tell me. So that was kind of cool. And then, of course, we continue to upgrade and the technology and everything. But having somebody around like that you could count on to do whatever, I'm sure we'll find a quality replacement. But I think it's going to be quite some time before somebody is able to provide us with the level of work that Matt was able to provide us for the last 3+ years.
Absolutely. And you can speak to the work much more than I can. I can just speak to the fact that he was a good dude, and I always liked having him in the booth with me. And you didn't know that he was a tech guy because you're not a video game guy. I knew that because I talked to him about video games. I'm pretty sure the first time I met him. So I knew he was a tech guy. But
well, thanks.
Yeah, you probably had to learn that out. Oh, my bad. I should have let you know.
Yeah, I know you guys had quite a time up there. One of my favorite moments with having Matt up there was a game where you were coming from the radio station, and so I had to start the first half of the soccer game, or the first half of the doubleheader, and it was women's soccer. And that was when we had our good friend Nigel Longbottom in the booth, and doing that game for the first time with Matt and Nigel was just a hilarious experiment and hilarious experience. I think we're gonna try and get Nigel back for another game this year. But that was fun doing that with him.
Yeah, it was. I bet it was.
All right, Aaron, we have made it through another show, folks. Social media, don't forget, we're on Twitter and Instagram at CCBC Essex Sports. And make sure to follow us on Facebook and YouTube. Just keyword search CCBC Essex Athletics. You can find us online at ccbcessexnights.com. Coming back next week, we're going to have more guests and updates, more correspondence, and make sure you subscribe to that YouTube channel. I know we want you on Facebook as well, but you subscribe to that YouTube channel, the Facebook channel. When we premiere these episodes or when we upload new videos, you'll get a notification. You'll be one of the first to see them. Again, thanks to our athletic administrator, Greg Witkop, correspondent Rebecca Plantholt, head baseball coach Sean O'Connor, and Matt Ryan for joining us today. For my co-host, Aaron Thomas, I'm Rocco Geppi. Thank you for joining us on the Kingdom Podcast. So long.